guys, it's Brooke. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a super quick beginner tutorial for how to make a adorable dragonfly crochet book cover for your favorite book. So recently I realized that I'm bringing my book everywhere I go, and due to that I just have it loose in my bag, which results in it getting kind of messed up, pages bent, dirty, things like that. And so I realized that I really should make a book cover so that it stays more protected. So I thought I would show y'all how I'm going to do that today. First off, I'm going to be using an acrylic yarn. You can use acrylic or cotton, it doesn't really matter. Cotton is going to be a little more sturdy, so if you want your yarn to not stretch as much, you want to make sure your book stays super safe, you can use cotton. But in the grand scheme of things, this isn't a contact sport. It doesn't really matter. Acrylic works just fine, and that's what I'm going to be using today. I'm going to be using this medium weight acrylic yarn. I think this is Big Twist in one of their orange colors. And then I'm going to be using a 5mm crochet hook. So for this book cover, we're going to be using double crochets. In order to know what kind of yarn and what kind of crochet hook you want, all you need to make sure is that your dragonfly is going to fit on your book cover. So this dragonfly stitch is going to be 8 rows long, and it's going to be a maximum of 10 stitches across. If you're wanting to make a cover for a tiny book, you probably need to size your hook down and you probably need to use a smaller yarn. If you're wanting to make a cover for a giant book, you can probably get away with a bigger hook and more yarn. In order to know for sure, we're going to start out with a foundation chain, see how many stitches that is, and just go from there. Also keep in mind when you're deciding how long to make your foundation chain, that the thicker your book is, the wider your foundation chain needs to be to accommodate that thickness. So this book is pretty thick, so I need to make my foundation chain maybe 1 or 2 stitches wider than this book is to make sure I can cover the entire thing when I close it up. Say if you were covering this Dune book, for example, it's not very wide at all. If you were making a cover for this book, I would make it exactly the width of this book, no more, because your stitches are going to be wider than the foundation chain, and it's not very thick, so you don't need to accommodate anything extra. I do want to note when you're trying to decide which book cover to make that this book cover, the one where you sew up both sides long ways and you've got the top open, this one's going to be more snug than the other book cover where you leave one of the long sides open. So if you know you want your book cover to be open at the top, I would highly recommend maybe adding an extra stitch or 2 just to make sure your book will fit comfortably. So here's my foundation chain against my book. You can see that it's just about the exact same width as my book. You don't need to make a couple extra chains to give some give, because keep in mind, we're going to be using double crochets for this cover, and double crochets are going to be much wider than our foundation chain. So make it pretty snug along your book cover and it'll all work out in the end. It's also important to note that your foundation chain should have an even number of chains. So I've chained 24 here, and that's exactly what I need. Now that we've measured our chain against our book and we're happy with the width, now I'm going to start the first row. So for the first row, we're going to work through the back bumps of our chain. So if you're looking at the front like this, you're going to see these arrows. We're going to turn our chain to the side, and when we do, we're going to see these back bumps. These bumps are what we're going to be working through. So we're going to be working rows of double crochets, and we're going to start and end our rows with a stacked single crochet. So I'm going to work a stacked single crochet into this first chain off my hook. So I'm going to turn, look at that back bump, and I'm going to work a stacked single crochet. And I'm going to do that by inserting my hook through this back bump, single crocheting like normal. And now, as we look at our single crochet, we've got 2 loops here. We've got one right here, and we've got one right here. I'm going to insert my hook through that second loop, this one right here, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. The stacked single crochet is often used instead of chaining 3 because it's a little thicker and it looks more natural compared to a chain 3 where it's pretty obvious sometimes where you've chained. So for the first row, all I'm going to do is double crochet all the way across. So I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to insert my hook through that next chain, through the back bump, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, insert my hook through the next chain, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, insert my hook, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So I'm just going to double crochet all the way across, and then I'll come back. So now I've just got 2 more stitches left on my row. As you can see, I've got one chain here, one chain here. So I'm just going to double crochet through both. All right, and this is row number 1 complete. So the reason why I like working through the back bumps is because it creates a really nice foundation chain. If you work through the front of your chain through these loops, you won't have this nice arrow effect at the end. So this is why I work through these back bumps. If you're a beginner, I would highly recommend inserting a stitch marker in the first and last stitch of every row to just help you keep track of your stitches. So this is what our foundation row looks like against our book. As you can see, even though the chain might have looked a little too skinny at the beginning, now that we've laid it out and now that we worked our first row of half double crochets, it's probably going to end up being the perfect width. Now what I'm going to do is just continue working these rows of double crochets until I get about a little less than halfway, until I start working on my dragonfly, keeping in mind that my dragonfly is going to be about 8 stitches long. The more rows of plain double crochet you work, the easier it'll be to tell when to start your dragonfly, because then you'll be able to see, okay, 8 rows of plain double crochet is this long, so therefore I need this much space to work my dragonfly. So I'm just going to keep working these double crochet rows until I'm happy with the length, and then I'll start on my dragonfly. So to start the next row, which is row number 2, all I'm going to do is turn my work, and I'm going to work a stacked single crochet into this first stitch of the row. So I'm going to insert my hook, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, and this is just a single crochet as normal. I'm going to insert my hook through the second loop here, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. And that's my first stacked single crochet of the row. As you can tell when you're comparing it to the double crochet below, they're very similar looking. So that's why I like to do this instead of a chain 3, because it makes it very seamless. So now what I'm going to do is keep working double crochets across the row. I'm actually going to work over this yarn end as well, just so I don't have to weave it in once I'm done with this project. So I'm just going to yarn over. I'm going to insert my hook through this next stitch, and I'm going to insert my hook underneath this yarn end. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So now I'm just going to keep working these rows of double crochet until I'm ready to start my dragonfly. Keep in mind that every row will start with a stacked single crochet, and if you're a beginner, I highly recommend adding a stitch marker to the first and last row of every stitch to make sure that you're not losing any stitches. So at this point, I've done 4 rows of plain double crochet, and now I know that this is going to be half the length of my dragonfly. So I'm just going to take some measurements to figure out when I want to start my dragonfly. So I know that this little swatch of 4 rows, which is half my dragonfly, is about 5.5 centimeters, which means my full dragonfly is going to be 11 centimeters. So I'm just going to measure that against my book along with my little swatch to figure out when I want to start my dragonfly stitch. And I know that I've got about 1 more row of double crochet before I'm ready to start my dragonfly. So I'm going to do that 1 more row, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to work the dragonfly stitch. So I worked 1 more row of my double crochets, and now I'm happy with the amount I have, and I'm ready to start my dragonfly stitch. If you're curious, this is what my 5 rows of double crochet look like on my book. And then my dragonfly is going to be about this many centimeters, 11 centimeters on my book, and then I'll have a couple more centimeters at the top. So what you're going to need to do in order to start your dragonfly stitch is identify your center stitch. And if you have an odd number of stitches like you're supposed to, you should have 1 right in the middle. So I have 23 stitches here, which means I've got 11 on this side, 11 on this side, and here's my center stitch. So now that I've marked this center stitch, what we're going to do for the next row is we're going to double crochet as normal until we get to the stitch right before our center stitch, and then we're going to chain 1 and work across the center stitch and all the way across again. So to start my next row, I'm just going to turn my work as normal. I'm going to do my stacked single crochet as normal. Now I'm going to do double crochets as normal until I get to 1 stitch before the center stitch of the row. Okay, so I just worked these 11 double crochets as normal, and then this next stitch is my center stitch. So now I'm going to chain 2. I'm going to skip my center stitch, and I'm just going to insert a double crochet in the next stitch. And that is the beginning of our dragonfly. So now I'm just going to double crochet all the way across. So I've just finished this row, and this is what it looks like. Now for the next stitch, we're going to do something similar. We're going to do a normal amount of double crochets, but we're going to stop 5 double crochets from our space. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to stop right here, which means I'm only going to work 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 double crochets before we stop. So I'm going to turn my work, start my next row as normal, do my stacked single crochet, So our stacked single crochet counts as our first double crochet. So we've got 5 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to double check that I've got the right amount of stitches here before our gap. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's correct. That's 5 double crochets before our gap stitch. So now I'm going to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to work a single crochet into this gap from the previous row. And now I'm going to chain another 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now I'm going to do the same thing we did on the other side. So I'm going to skip the first 5 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to work in the 6th one with a double crochet like that. And now I'm going to finish with 5 more double crochets. All right, so this is what our row looks like. Our next row is going to be very similar. We're going to double crochet until the stitch right before the gap. And in this stitch, we're going to put 2 double crochets, do a similar chain, work into this stitch, do a similar chain, and work across. So let's start. I'm going to turn my work, do my stacked single crochet as normal. Now I'm going to double crochet until 1 stitch before the gap. All right, I've got 1 stitch before my chain space, so now I'm going to insert 2 double crochets into this stitch. All right. And now I'm going to chain 5 and then insert a double crochet into this single crochet from the row below. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to insert my hook through the stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now I'm going to chain 5 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I'm going to put 2 double crochets into this first stitch from my gap. All right, there's 1 and there's 2. And now I'm just going to double crochet all the way across. All right, this is what our dragonfly is looking like so far. So for this next row, we're going to work across these double crochets like normal. We're going to be double crocheting into these chains and working across this double crochet like normal. As always, starting with my stacked single crochet. And now I'm just going to double crochet as normal until I get to my chains from the previous row. So now I'm going to be double crocheting in the next 4 chains. I'm going to be ignoring this last one, the 5th one. For this, if you'd like, you can work through the top, you can work through the back bumps. It doesn't really matter, honestly, for something like this. So I'm just going to work through the front. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, like I said, we're going to ignore this next chain. So now we're going to skip the next 3 places we'd put a stitch. So we're skipping the last chain of this section, the double crochet in the first chain of the following section. I'm going to double crochet into this next chain right here. I'm going to double crochet. And now I'm just going to double crochet into these next 3 chains and all the way across. Okay, so this is what our dragonfly looks like so far. So now we're on the easy parts. Essentially, all we're going to do for the next however many rows, it's kind of up to you for how long you want the tail of your dragonfly to be. We're going to double crochet across until we get here. Chain 1, skip this chain 1 space, double crochet across. And you can do that as many times as you like. It really just depends on how long you want the tail of your dragonfly to be. So I'm going to show y'all how to work that now. So I'm going to turn my work. I'm going to start with my stacked single crochet. Double crochet all the way across until I get to the stitch before the chain space. All right, now I'm at that chain space, so all I'm going to do is chain 1. I'm going to skip this chain space and I'm going to work a double crochet in this first double crochet of the next section. Now I'm just going to double crochet all the way across. So this is how a tail is starting to look. Now all we're going to do is repeat this row over and over until your dragonfly is as long as you want it to be. I'm going to repeat this row 3 more times off camera and then I'll come back. So again, we're just going to double crochet until we get to this chain space, chain 1, skip the chain space, and then double crochet all the way across. And just keep repeating that until your dragonfly is as long as you like it, and then I'll show you how to finish the book cover. All right, so I've repeated that row 3 more times, and here's what my finished dragonfly looks like. And here is what it looks like on my book. So now we've got to the easy part. So all we're gonna do is continue doing these plain double crochet rows all the way around until it reaches back up to the top, and then we're ready to assemble it. So I'm going to show you how to work this first double crochet row, considering we're working over a chain space. So we're going to start the row like normal with a stacked single crochet. I'm going to double crochet all the way across until we get to our chain space. All right, now we're at the chain space. All we're going to do is insert one double crochet in this chain space. You can go through the actual chain if you want to, or you can just go in the space itself. I just went in the space itself. I think it's easier. And now I'm going to double crochet all the way across. All right, there's our finished double crochet row. Now I'm going to continue making these rows of double crochets until my book cover can cover the entire length of my book, and then I'll come back and show y'all how to sew it up. All right, so this is what the book cover looks like so far. It's just a really long strip of these rows of double crochets, and this is what it looks like when my book is in it. So as you can see, it meets perfectly around the sides, and I ended up having a little bit of excess rows on the top. So this is what my book cover looks like on my book, and now I just need to sew it up, and here's where you have a decision to make. So there are a couple different ways you could sew this book cover up. First way is by sewing up these sides and just having this basically function like a folder where you just slip your book through the top. Another way that you can do it is sew up one side, two sides, and then have this side open. And then you could maybe add like a little button here, a little clasp, a way to hold it shut. Both ways work great. It's really up to you. I'm gonna show y'all how to do both. So the first way I'm gonna do is show y'all how to sew the side shut and have it open on the top. So I'm gonna start by showing y'all how to slip stitch this shut. All you're gonna do is line up your two sides like so. And once you've finished a row like I've just done, you're gonna slip stitch this final stitch on this row to the first stitch of your back panel, like so. So I'm just gonna yarn over, pull through, and then pull through. And that's gonna be my first slip stitch. And now I'm gonna turn my work and I'm just gonna slip stitch down the sides. So I'm gonna insert my hook through this first double crochet on each row, yarn over, pull through, and then I'm gonna insert my hook kind of between. So if you look at your stitches, you've got double crochet, double crochet, double crochet. So what I'm gonna do is insert one slip stitch through the body of each row of double crochets and then one through the top. So that slip stitch I just did went through the body, and so now I'm gonna insert one through the top. And now I'm gonna have this one go through the body. And then this next one through the top. And I'm just gonna do this all the way down. So this is how you slip stitch it. This is what the inside's gonna look like. And then if we were to flip it around to the other side, this is what the outside looks like when you slip stitch it. So I'm just gonna do this all the way down this side, and then I'm gonna cut my yarn off, attach it to this end, slip stitch all the way up this side. And that's really gonna be the end of our book cover. All right, I just finished slip stitching all the way down the side. Now I just cut off a little bit of excess yarn. I'm going to pull through that, through my last slip stitch, and now I just need to weave this in. This is what my seam looks like. Now I'm gonna go to the other side and do the exact same thing. So all I'm going to do, I'm gonna insert my hook through the last two stitches of the rows, yarn over, pull through, and I'm actually gonna yarn over and pull through this end just to give myself a little knot. Pull that tight. Now this end can be woven in at the end. And now I'm just gonna yarn over, pull through this yarn I've got right here, and now I'm ready to slip stitch all the way up, and I'm just gonna do it the exact same way I did it before. So I'm gonna have one through the body of the double crochets and one through the top of the double crochet. All right, I just finished slip stitching all the way up this side. I'm gonna do the same thing I did before. I'm just gonna cut off a few inches of yarn to weave in. I'm gonna pull through this last stitch here, and here is our finished book sleeve. Now I'm gonna flip it right side out. So this is what your finished book sleeve is gonna look like. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I wanted it to be pretty snug because I know that over time my stitches are gonna stretch out. So this is exactly how I wanted it to fit. And now I feel comfortable putting this in my bag without my book messing up at all. And yeah, here's the finished book sleeve. Now all I'm gonna do is weave in these excess ends, and this is the finished product. Okay, so here's what my second book cover looks like. Now this one I'm gonna sew the opposite way. So instead of sewing up the sides and having the top open, I'm gonna sew up the top in one of the sides and then leave the other side open, and then we can create a cute little button clasp. So I chained one and I just cut off a little bit of excess so I can weave my end in. I'm gonna pull this end all the way through and tighten it So now what I'm gonna do is take my yarn and attach it at the bottom corner so that I can sew all the way up the side, all the way across the top, and then I'll be ready to start the clasp on this side. Okay, I just want to talk about briefly what sides you should sew up depending on how you want your book to face. So for me, I ended up sewing the left side of my book cover and then the top. So when I flip that inside out, it becomes the right side and the top of the book that's sewn up. So because of that, when I put my book into the book cover and the front cover's facing me, I get to see the spine on the opening of my book cover. But if you don't want to see the spine, if you want the pages to be on the opening of your book cover, you should sew it the opposite way. So instead of sewing up the left side, you should sew up the right side. So when you flip it inside out, it becomes the left side. So when you put in your book cover with the front cover facing you, you can see the pages in the opening. So I'm just going to do my best to line up my stitches, and then I'm going to insert my hook through the bottom 2 stitches of the end of my book cover. I'm just going to insert my hook through the last 2 stitches. I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull through, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull through the side of my yarn that ends, so not the side that's connected to the ball of yarn. Just going to pull that through, and this is going to create a small knot. Now I'm going to pull that tight just to have some more security, and then this yarn end I'll just leave to weave in at the very end. Now what I'm going to do is insert my hook back through that same stitch, yarn over, pull through, and now I'm ready to slip stitch all the way across. I'm going to do the same slip stitch technique that I showed with the other book cover. So I'm just going to slip stitch through the body of each double crochet, and then I'm going to slip stitch through the top of each double crochet. All right, I'm going to keep slip stitching all the way up and then all the way across the top, and then when I get to this section, I'll come back. So this is what my book cover looks like. I've slip stitched all the way up the length of the book, and I've slip stitched all the way across the top. And now we're getting ready to do the clasp. All I'm gonna do is explain conceptually what we're gonna do before we start. We're gonna single crochet all the way around the back side. And then once we get to about halfway on the back side of this book cover, we're gonna chain a really long chain, come back down, single crochet all the way, slip stitch to the first stitch. And the reason why we're making this chain is because we're going to attach a button to our book cover, and this chain is going to go around our button and clasp our book cover shut. I would recommend when you're making this single crochet border to size down on your hook just to make it a little more snug. I've been using a 4.5 millimeter hook, so I'm going to size down to a 4 just to make sure that this clasp is really snug. So I'm going to start working this single crochet border. So I sized down my hook. I was using a 4.5 and now I'm using a 4 millimeter hook. So I'm just going to single crochet all the way across until I get halfway on this back side, and then I'll show y'all how to make the long chain for the clasp. Okay, so this is what my book cover is looking like so far. As you can see, I started single crocheting all the way down, and I've gotten about halfway on the other side, and now this is the time where we're gonna figure out where we're gonna place our button. So the reason why we're going about halfway is because we're gonna add a button to this, and so essentially what we want to do is create a really long chain that can wrap around the button itself. The first thing we need to do is decide where we're gonna place the button. So I think I'm gonna place my button about here, which is about halfway through the tail. As you can see, I've got 1, 2 tail sections below. It's matching up with this third one, and then 1, 2 tail sections above. So that's how high I want my button to be. So now you need to decide how far in you want it to go, because if you want it super far in, you'll need a really long chain to cover it. If you want it super on the outside, you don't need as long of a chain. I think I'm gonna place mine about right there. And now all I'm gonna do is make a really long chain that will be able to wrap around this button and then come back down. And when you're trying to decide how long to make your chain, I really recommend putting your book inside because it'll be easier for you to judge how long your chain needs to be. I also recommend, placing your button here just so you can get a good idea of what it would look like. If you'd rather sew your button on first before you do this, you can totally do that. It's totally fine. Now that I've decided I want 20 chains for this clasp, I'm done. Now what I'm gonna do is skip a couple stitches and keep single crocheting as I go. So what I'm gonna do is just put my chain around where my button would be and just see where the yarn kind of naturally seems like it's gonna pick up. For me, it seems like I'm gonna attach my yarn right into this stitch. That gives me a good amount of slack to be able to hook around the button without being too crazy. Start single crocheting on the other side. And at this point, I'm gonna take my book out. And now all I'm gonna do is single crochet all the way to the top, and then I'm gonna slip stitch to my first single crochet of the row. And at that point, we'll be able to attach our button and we'll be done. So this is what our book cover is looking like. We finished the clasp. It's gonna clasp like this. And now all we need to do is sew the button on. I've got my button, I've got some thread, And I've got a needle, so all I'm gonna do is attach the button and we'll be done with our book cover. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. This is going to be the end of this tutorial. I hope you enjoy your finished book sleeve. I know I do. If you want any more beginner crochet tutorials, please check out my channel. I've got a bunch. Specifically, if you're a left-handed crocheter and you're looking for tutorials that specifically cater to lefties, check out my channel because I've got a bunch of videos on that. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys.